Moral culpability. What does this mean? The determination of who is ultimately at fault or deserving of blame. Again, this is a legitimate and real concept. There is fault. There is blame. We got to get over this new age nonsense that nobody's at fault, nobody's to blame. You should never say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. That caused a lot of chaos and trauma for other people. You're not to blame. It just happened. No, wrong. The people who did the behavior are to blame. Who carried out the Holocaust in Germany? The people who followed their orders to do it. That's who carried it out. Order followers is the answer. Who carried out the purge of political dissidents in Soviet Russia? Order followers. And they're always in the form of police. Why do you think they call a totalitarian system a police state? Why don't they call it a banker state? How come they don't call it a politician state? What about a lawyer state? How about a judge state? Why not call it any of those things? You want to know why? Because none of those people are ultimately responsible for bringing that condition into manifestation through their behavior. They're the order givers. The order followers carry out their commands and through their behavior make that condition a reality. That's why it's called a police state. Because every police state that has ever existed has always been created by police who follow their orders because they don't want to take responsibility and think for themselves and know the difference between right and wrong for themselves like an adult. Instead, I want to be a child who obeys daddy because I have daddy issues. All right? And that's what it's really about, folks. We're going to get to that. There is such a thing as blame for the commission of actions which have resulted in harm or loss to others. This is what culpable means. It comes from the Latin culpa, meaning fault or blame. It means at fault or deserving of blame. Now, who's more morally culpable? The order giver or the order follower? And please recognize I've underlined and capitalized the term more. I'm not telling you the order givers are not morally culpable. They are. That's not the question. Are any of these people morally culpable is not my question. My question is, look at the full question. Who is more morally culpable? The order giver or the order follower? Always. Always. At all times and places. At all times and places. I put this meme up on Facebook, and I got some hate back for it. Okay? People don't want to hear this. Like I said, I'm not here to be popular to make friends. I'm here to tell people what the truth actually is, and they have to accept it or reject it on their own. I made this meme and put it up on Facebook, and it had politicians on the left that said, my actions, underlined and capitalized, didn't cause that. And then there was some soldiers or Marines, whatever they are, order followers on the right side, and they're also saying the same statement. My actions didn't cause that. And then at the bottom, I just put this question. I'm sorry. Looks like, I'm sorry. At the top, I put this question. Who is lying and who is telling the truth? So who's lying here? And if people can't see, I hope that they can see this horrific picture. This is the result of, bombings that took place in the Middle East around Iraq. And it's a father carrying his dead child in his arms, okay? Maybe if bombs were raining down on our children, we might think differently about going in and waging imperialism on other nations. I don't know. Maybe we might think differently about it, right? But when it happens to somebody else's child, that's okay. That's done in the name of freedom, okay? Well, who caused this? Did they cause it? No, they didn't cause it. They are not the actual cause of this. Because you know what all they did? They signed some pieces of paper, wearing their expensive suits, okay? And they told these guys, they said, well, you're under our orders now. Go and bomb these people. And you know what these people did? Say, yes, sir, and go and drop the bombs. And fire off the ammunition. Okay? These are the people whose actions create things like this, not these people. All they're doing is speaking into somebody else's ear. All they've done is speech. Speech, not actions. See, again, really look. My actions didn't cause that. Yes, it is. If these people are saying my actions didn't cause that, they're lying. Very, very, very painful and difficult thing for people to comprehend and accept. I'm not telling you shouldn't feel bad hearing this, but I'm telling you it's true. The painful truth, the order follower always bears more moral culpability than the order giver. For the reason that the order follower is the one who actually performed the action, and in taking such action, actually brought the resultant harm into physical manifestation. Order following is the pathway to every form of evil and chaos in our world. It should never be seen as a virtue by anyone who considers themselves a moral human being. Order followers have ultimately been personally responsible and morally culpable for every form of slavery and every single totalitarian regime that has ever existed upon the face of the earth. That's the painful truth that people don't want to accept because they want to believe the absolute nonsense that order following is a virtue of any kind. And it needs to be obliterated from the face of the earth, because it's not the way to any kind of virtues or order. It's the pathway to evil and annihilation. That's what it is. Responsibility versus abdication. So why don't these people want to think for themselves?
It's too easy.
It's too easy to just follow the orders of somebody else. They believe somehow magically this absolves them of personal responsibility to choose right from wrong. An individual's personal responsibility to choose right action over wrong action for themselves always belongs to that individual. And that responsibility can never be given to another person or passed along. One can only claim and imagine that they can abdicate their personal responsibility for such choice to someone else. It can never actually be done in reality. You're only making a claim. I'm not responsible for that behavior because this person told me to do it. That's just a claim. And moreover, what it really is it's just a damn lie. Okay? More simply put, an individual is always personally responsible for their own actions, period, and the end. If you did it, you're responsible for it. There are no cop-outs. Stop trying to make excuses or justifications for criminal behavior. Own up to personal responsibility. If you did wrong action, you did it. You caused it. I like how David Icke words this. He says, accept responsibility for yourself and your actions, thoughts, and words. You alone make these choices, so you alone are answerable to the consequences of your behavior. The feeble excuse that your boss required it, that the establishment expected it, holds no truth or justification. What is the point of having principles if you allow others to dictate your behavior? Really, those who allow others to dictate their behavior don't have principles. And there's a reason they don't have principles, because they hate themselves. They're in psychological self-loathing, and there's a reason they're in that state, which my future work is going to cover in depth, in extensive depth and detail. At the end of the day, you will judge your performance and the contribution you've made to creation. It will not be based on what another expected of you or what you did because you felt trapped. Like, oh, there's no other way. I can't envision my way out of this. I can't envision doing something else. I might have to get another job. I might have to read and learn. I can't envision becoming a different person than the identity I've already forged for myself. How could I possibly imagine that? I have all my eggs in this basket. My whole ego identity is all wrapped up in my job and what I do. That defines who I am. I can't go against that. It's all nonsense. It's all what people are doing just because they feel trapped and they can't imagine that there's another way. Most people erroneously believe, this is the second part of the abdication of responsibility on the part of the people. Most people erroneously believe that they can hand over their natural law right to defend themselves to another individual, group, or entity. In making such a false claim that somebody else is my protector, somebody else, it's their responsibility to protect me, okay, and defend me, they have attempted to abdicate a personal responsibility which actually always belongs to them and can never be given away. That's the self-defense principle. You own it. It's yours. You can't give it away to somebody else. Shock and amazement. Okay? That is your responsibility already. And guess what? You know what? They're all too happy. These controllers are now even all too happy to say, it's not our responsibility to protect you. Because what their actual goal is they're just revenue men for the new king. That's all they are. And to slap people back into line if they try to exercise rights that the new king called government has decreed that they may not exercise. That's what their real role is. They don't serve and protect the people. They serve and protect the ruling class. And they don't want to admit that to themselves. You know why? Because they're liars, most of all to themselves. It's a bunch of childish liars. Franklin said those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither and will lose both. And this addresses the fear of chaos and the desire to abdicate your personal responsibility to defend yourself to other people just because you're afraid and you don't want to take the responsibility of doing it yourself. You want to stay in that mindset? I'll give up my freedom to be safe? Well, enjoy your safe slavery. I, for one, will take my dangerous and chaotic freedom. Okay? I'll take the absolute cannibal lurking around every corner, and I'll take my chances. Thank you very much. Give me my freedom and my assault rifle, and I'll take my chances. Thank you. Okay? So the idea that you just want to be kept safe and you'll give up your freedom to do so, it's just a child. That's how a child thinks. And that's what this is really about. Not wanting to grow up and become adults. And again, there's a reason for this. This is the underlying psychological reason, but there's an even deeper one. But I'm going to touch on this one first. Self-respect versus self-loathing. People who don't want to take personal responsibility and become an adult are in this psychological condition. It's called self-loathing. What it means is you hate yourself. Nobody who wants to perpetuate slavery can possibly like themselves. They cannot love themselves. It's impossible. You are already in a state of self-hatred if you believe in government, if you believe in its legitimacy. Okay? Because you believe in slavery, and therefore you're in that slavery system and you want it to continue. How can you possibly love yourself? It's not possible. Self-loathing is the underlying psychological condition that causes people to attempt to abdicate their own personal responsibility to exercise conscience and fall into patterns of order following and justification. Just as it is not possible for an order follower to truly be exercising conscience, it is not possible for an order follower to truly love themselves. These two states cannot exist simultaneously. You cannot be an order follower and love yourself. It is impossible. They are contradictory psychological conditions. Okay? Here's what a self-loathing person really is. They're trapped in a trauma abuse victim cycle. A trauma happens, there's an abuser, there's a victim, and then it repeats itself. Because often the one who's abused becomes the traumatizer, and then the cycle repeats again. Talked about this pretty extensively on my podcast series, all right? That's what self-loathing, that's what this mind state, okay? This is a golem creature, okay? It's a 100% programmed and lifeless thing that is imbued with the ability to actually move like a robot. You could liken it to a flesh robot, okay? And it's a concept in ancient dark occultism, all right? And the golem is driven by the force of self-loathing. And that's what the order followers are. They're golems. Okay? I'm not saying this to insult people. I don't really care how people take it. I'm telling them what they really are and what the dark occultists think of them. They call them their dogs and their pets. That's their name for the police and the military. I did a whole series on that, okay? And I'm not telling you that from book knowledge. I'm telling you that from their lips to my ears. That's what they call them. The golem is in this mindset. Since I have suffered, I will cause suffering to others. Since I can't deal with my nested psychological traumas and childhood issues and inadequacy issues, okay, I'm going to take out all of that nested, subconscious, psychological frustration on other people that I have no right to take it out upon. That's the golem mindset. Self-loathing is created when an earlier trauma has been suppressed and buried deeply into the subconscious. That's the role of the subconscious, to protect the conscious mind from traumatic experiences so that the conscious mind doesn't keep reliving it and therefore re-experiencing it in the physiology. However, if we never bring up that shadow material to the conscious level, it builds and builds and builds until it ultimately destroys us, psychically and spiritually. All right? Instead of confronting, dealing with, and healing that trauma, people don't want to do that work. It's too hard to dredge up that shadow material. It's hard work. Believe me, to come out of the mind state I was in, I had to do that shadow work for years. Years of more suffering and pain, saying, what do I have to look in the mirror and confront about myself? And then work to change and admit thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong. I don't know how many thousands of times I had to look in a mirror and say that to myself. Sometimes to a point where I was so depressed I couldn't get out of bed for days. I would just sit and lay in bed and play doom metal all day. Literally, endlessly, repetitively. And just sitting there in that condition of total self-loathing and total depression because of what I know I took part in. And that I know was still my mental makeup, was still my psychological makeup that was going to take years to get out of. And I'm trying to explain this to prevent people from having to go through all that suffering. This knowledge can be gleaned without having to go down that path. It can be done. I'm not telling you that's easy work, but it is possible. Such trauma could take the form of feelings of inadequacy, whether they are real or imagined. And you know what that mind state ultimately is? It's a self-prison. That's somebody putting themselves in a cage. These people who want to take out their psychological frustrations on other people, they're prisoners. They are in the cage and they love being in the cage. They don't have any desire for freedom. The only kind of person that would have no desire for real freedom is a person who's in the psychological state of self-loathing and hates themselves and does not love themselves. Now, what heals self-loathing? Self-respect. And we have to know what the word respect means. And this is about looking at yourself. Introspection. Respect comes from the Latin re, meaning again, and the Latin verb spectare, which means to look at. You put them together, to look at again, to take another look at. Well, what are you taking another look at? You're taking another look at yourself. That's what respect starts as. You can't give something to somebody that you don't have. If I don't have $10 in my pocket, can't give it to you. If I don't have a coin in my pocket, I can't give it to somebody else. You got to have it first to give it. So nobody can give respect to anybody else unless they first developed it inwardly. Self-respect has to come first. And that's why these people don't respect anybody, order followers, most of all themselves. Until they do that work of self-introspection, they're not going to develop that self-respect. And I'm not telling you that's easy work. It's hard work that can take a lot of time. And it's dredging up shadow material that most people want to run away from. They don't want to confront that about themselves. Only self-respect can heal self-loathing and therefore help to put an order follower on the path to conscience. We need to take another look at ourselves. The lost word. All right, this is the end of the natural law segment, and I'm just going to talk about solutions toward the end a little bit. All right? The lost word. It's a concept in esoteric Freemasonry, which represents a state of consciousness that has been largely, quote unquote, lost to the majority of human beings. In order to speak the quote-unquote lost word, a human being must work upon themselves in order to achieve a state of equilibrium or balance between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. In such a state of balanced consciousness, the being has come to know oneself, as well as the working operations of the macrocosm, meaning natural law. In doing so, that person has also come to understand the objective difference between right and wrong, or as these concepts are referred to in the tradition of Freemasonry, they have come to understand the difference between light, which is right, and darkness, which is wrong. Or light, which is knowledge of right and wrong, and darkness, which is ignorance of right and wrong, respectively. All right? What is the lost word, though? That's the lost word, ladies and gentlemen. You know the knowledge of the highest levels of Freemasonry now. Most actual Freemasons in the lodge system don't know the lost word. The lost word is no. And I would suggest to you, it is a dual word. The lost word is dual, meaning it's two things. It's not just one. It is the word no, N-O, and it is the word know, K-N-O-W. Those are the lost words. Okay? In the enlightened state of consciousness generated through the knowledge of natural law, a human being is finally able to speak the so-called lost word, which is no. No is the word of all power. Only when we say no to those who would claim to be our owners, those who would claim that it is they who will decide which rights we have or do not have, do we stop externalizing our power to anyone outside of ourselves, and in doing so, reclaim all of our rights, all of our property that has been taken without right. Sadly, very, very few people in our world have the knowledge, care, and courage that is required to do this. This is why this all-powerful word is considered lost. And there's the other variant of the lost word, no. Know your rights. The reason you have to know what the difference between right and wrong is, and therefore know what rights you have and what rights you do not have, is because those who do not know those things will never say the lost word to someone who claims to be their owner. They will not say no, N-O.